Ask everyone to take their seats. Okay, we'd like to ask our very capable clerk to call the roll, please.
Senator Chambers Armstrong. Senator Carpenter. Senator Mills.
Here.
Senator Schickel. Senator Southworth. Senator Turner. Senator Webb. Senator Westerfield. Senator Wheeler.
Here.
Senator Williams.
Here.
Representative Ballman. Representative Blanton. Representative Bowling.
Here.
Representative Bridges. Representative Burke.
Here.
Representative Chester Burton.
Here.
Representative Dossett.
Present.
Representative Dotson. Representative Flannery.
Here.
Representative Fugate. Here. Representative Gentry.
Here.
Representative Johnson. Representative McCool.
Here.
Representative Miles. Representative Smith.
Here.
Representative Wesley.
Here.
Representative White.
Here.
Representative Williams.
Here.
Co-Chair Smith. And Co-Chair Gooch.
Here. Okay, we do have a quorum. At this time, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the September 19th meeting. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, the like sign. Okay, the minutes stand approved. Thank everyone for being here today. We have some very important topics that we want to discuss. First, we're going to get an update from the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority on the water and wastewater assistance for troubled and economically restrained systems program. So with that, I think Sandy Williams, Executive Director of the KIA, which is the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority, is here. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Good afternoon.
Turn on her mic.
Oh, can you turn your mic on, please? Okay, thank you. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. I'm Sandy Williams, Executive Director with the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority. Thank you for the invitation to come and talk about our newest program at Kentucky Infrastructure Authority. We're very excited to see the results. The Kentucky Water and Wastewater Assistance for Troubled or Economically Restrained Systems. It was passed in House Bill 563. Excuse me. And we are in full swing. So what I would like to do is just to give everyone a quick update. First of all, the timeline. Where are we? So, well, we started in mid-July. Accepting applications. We accepted applications up through August 30th, and we are currently in process of evaluating those applications for completeness, for eligibility, and we have received about 150 applications. We received about 160. We're still working with some of the communities to see if they will be able to get their completed application in to us. So we're working closely with those communities, and the requests total over $700 million. The funding that was made available, it was $75 million in this fiscal year of the biennium and an additional $75 million in next year's second year of the biennium. So thank you very much for those funds. And so what we plan to do is have a report submitted to LRC by December 1st to provide all of that information to you, to the General Assembly, to make decisions for funding. And then when those decisions are made, we'll get that list back, and then we will work with the communities for those items that are approved. So what is KIA required to do? We're required to hold monthly meetings, which we have been doing. We, again, are trying to determine funding eligibility, recipient eligibility, project eligibility. The board has developed an objective scorecard and a rubric. They're using a weighted scoring based on the 12 scoring criteria that we'll talk about a little bit later. We will have that summary to LRC by the December 1st deadline. And then we're prepared to provide detailed feedback to each of the applicants within 14 days of the KIA board assigning a project score. What are we going to send to you? So evaluations and scores of the proposed funding recipients, and a proposal for the structure and the terms of the funding. The legislation prescribed that funding can be awarded either as a grant, a loan, a no-interest loan, or a forgivable loan. We will, of course, send you a list of all of the program applicants, identify any applicants who did not meet the eligibility criteria, and we will provide a list of the eligible uses within those applications. The KIA board did establish the interest rates, again, pursuant to the legislation. They are 50 basis points lower than our state revolving fund loan programs. So if a community does qualify for a loan and not a grant, these are the interest rates that would be attached to those funding requests. How do we determine eligibility? To be an eligible recipient, the applicant must be a public water or wastewater system that meets one or more of the 9 criteria that were outlined in the legislation. And you'll see a little later, we've grouped those into revenue criteria, median household income criteria, and then a ratios criteria. So what types of projects are eligible? This fund is a little different than all of the Infrastructure Authority's other loan programs in that, so all the loan programs can fund capital projects. Those are the brick and mortar types of projects that everyone is used to seeing. This fund may also assist with non-capital projects. So what does that mean? We can help a utility pay for their audit. We can help a utility pay off outstanding debt. So those are some studies that they need, rate studies possibly. So those are non-capital types of projects that are also eligible under this fund. Here are the 12 scoring criteria. And again, the board did pass a weighted scoring rubric. So instead of getting 1 point for each of these 12 different criteria, some utilities will get additional points, and I'll show you an example of that right here. So you can see as an example on the first line, the utility's median household income of their service area compared to the state's MHI. And you can see as the MHI falls further below the state's MHI, the score goes up. We will, so again, the legislation prescribed 4 different types of repayment scenarios: principal and interest, principal with 0 interest, a forgivable loan, and the board did pass standard terms where if it is a forgivable loan, it would be at 50% principal forgiveness and then grant. The standard repayment term that will be attached if the utility qualifies for a loan would be 30 years. We have a target debt coverage ratio of 1.1. And the board's funding recommendation will be based on the assumption if you can afford to pay it back, you probably should. So under each funding scenario, we will calculate a coverage ratio. And as the amount required to be repaid is reduced, that coverage ratio should go up. So here's an example of that. You can see on the first line, under scenario 1, if the utility had to repay the full principal plus interest, their debt coverage falls below the 1.1. They don't have enough money to pay that back. And then as the amount of debt service required goes down, you can see that coverage ratio does go up. So the scenario on line 1, the board will be making a recommendation that particular item, that particular utilities request would be funded solely by grant funds. That's the end of my update today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Representative McCool.
Mr. Chairman, Sandy, I'm over here hiding behind this pole, so
Yes,
you can't
sir.
throw something at me, I hope. But thank you for your hard work, and certainly we know it's needed. And 75 million is a lot, but evidently we've got a bigger pie that we need to look at. Just curious on the scoring criteria. And I know this all come quickly, so this may not have happened. So I'm just curious if the ad districts or the water or wastewater companies who filled out the application was aware of the scoring criteria when they done it. So I didn't know if they had access to that prior to or if it's after the fact.
That's a great question. Thank you. So we did provide the scoring criteria. It was made available to the applicants in the area development districts. But the board, when the applications first went out, the board had not yet put the weighting to it. So people were aware of what they were going to be scored on, but not possibly the weight of the score.
Well, that's good. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Now, my understanding, according to the timeline here, is that you will get the projects and present them to the KIA board for scoring and funding. Then in December, of course, you're going to provide the project applications and scores to the General Assembly. Does that then mean that we will actually approve those in the 25 session?
That is my understanding of yes, sir, of how the program would work. We would provide the funding recommendation, the project and applicant eligibility, and then the decisions would be made by the General Assembly. Yes, sir.
Okay, that seems a little different than anything I've experienced in the past. I may be wrong, but it's different than what we used to. We would provide a certain amount of money to different agencies, and then they would sometimes they may require a letter of recommendation from the legislature, but it appears in this case we're actually going to make those decisions ourselves. So, any other questions? Okay, the other question is how are we going to provide the $700 million worth of requests with $75,000 or actually $150,000 of $150 million. So,
well, thankfully the budget process is outside of my purview, sir.
I understand. Okay, thank you very much. We do have a question here, Senator Southworth.
Thank you very much for your service. So that opens up kind of a different thing because you talked about some people need grants, some people may be able to do a forgivable loan, some people could do a loan with interest. So is the calculus on this $150 million basically going to come down to carrying loans and whatnot, and it's almost like a revolving fund versus actually the $150 million is going out the door and we still need $550?
I believe the program was established as a revolving fund with the possibility to provide grants or forgivable loans to those entities that just can't service the debt.
So follow up on that. If after 2025 we can establish who all's getting how much and when, or is that going to be in the December 1st report where we can find out, okay, how much is left of the 700?
That will be available to the General Assembly in the December 1st report.
Okay. So I think the good news is before even the next session, we may know, because it's not apples and apples, like 700 minus 150 equals 550. It may be we actually are on the hook for less. That's good news. Thank you.
Okay, one follow-up. The $150 million, $75 million in each year of the budget. Where are the source of those funds coming from?
I believe, so those are general fund dollars, and I believe the budget reserve trust fund.
Okay. And I think that's going to be very important as we're going forward because, in the last few years, we actually have had money that has come from federal government as far as, the money that was part of the stimulus, the money from COVID, and all these other types of funds, the infrastructure bill and all of those types of things. And, we want to have, if we're going to have this fund, it's going to be successful, and we see the need that we have out there, we're going to have reoccurring money that's going to be able to be put each year from now on into this fund, and I'm hopeful that we're going to be there, but I'm not confident. As I said, it depends on how much of that money was federal money that's come from all of the programs that have been available in recent years. So you may not have any comment on that, but I just think I see that as a real issue going forward with this fund being successful and really being able to help some of these really struggling water districts out there, so, and cities as well. So, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your support, your report. Next, we're going to have an update from the Kentucky's electric cooperatives. And I think that maybe I'm anticipating that some of that report will talk about what you see out there as far as regulations and how they're going to affect your co-op industry. And but at any rate, please introduce yourself for the record and proceed after you introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chase Krigler, Vice President of Government Affairs for Kentucky Electric Cooperatives, the statewide association for all electric cooperatives in the state. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to be with you today to give an update on Kentucky Electric Cooperatives and the work that we do across the Commonwealth. I wanted to start off today with a little bit of information and an update on the recent hurricanes, with Hurricanes Helene and Milton recently ravaging the southeast. It's important to talk about a little bit the work that our linemen have done to restore power across the southeast. And we sent a significant number of crews across all areas to restore power to our co-op brothers and sisters and members across there as well. And I would also note that I've gotten this question from several members of the legislature. We typically only send our crews out to restore power in other areas once the power has been restored at home. And that was a question as well. Let's see here. Moving. So if we look at this slide right here, these are the co-ops that were affected by and responding to Helene in red, and then the co-ops in the orange color were receiving mutual assistance. In total, 19 Kentucky co-ops sent line crews to help out after Hurricane Helene to co-ops across the country as well. Mutual aid within Kentucky during Helene, September and October of this year. Obviously, our line crews work diligently. On a good day, line work is exceptionally dangerous, and these men and women go out to work in all sorts of weather conditions to restore power as well. Mutual aid work done in North Carolina after Helene. We can see the terrain that these individuals are working in, making sure that we can restore power as quickly and as safely as possible as well. Work done in South Carolina, obviously a pole replacement work there along with lines. Those are our crews as well. I would note within these, you're seeing crews from Meade County RECC, South Kentucky RECC, Clark Energy, Taylor County, as well as Tri-County RECC. Here we go. There it is. Perfect. And these are some of the temporary quarters that were set up for our linemen and women to make sure that they can get the proper rest and food that they need and any aid that they may need working in those conditions as well. Obviously, we are exceptionally proud of those individuals that do that work across the Commonwealth and sending them to a variety of places. And it was the largest mutual aid deployment in the state's history. And so we're exceptionally proud of that we were able to get so many individuals back on so quickly. What you'll note here, though, is that while there are 26 electric cooperatives in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, they are not unique to Kentucky. Across the country, we have 900 electric cooperatives serving 42 million folks in 48 states. Important to note that while co-ops only serve 12% of the nation's electric consumers, but we own and maintain 42% of the nation's electric distribution lines and serve over 75% of the country's geography. So there are a wide number of places where cooperatives exist across the country. Moving to the Commonwealth, you'll see the colored areas there are individual distribution cooperatives as well, 24 member-owned distribution cooperatives. We're in 117 counties, over 900,000 homes and businesses, and we serve 1.8 million Kentuckians with affordable, reliable power each and every day. Moving on to our Kentucky NASCAR map, we thought it important to show not only the coloration, but the logos of each local cooperative and where it is that we serve, color-coded there. And so again, our geography is exceptionally wide, serving a significant number of areas. I will note in there the areas of white that you see in there that are not colored are served by either investor-owned utilities or municipal utilities. These utilities typically serve larger cities, towns, businesses, high-impact corridors as well. And so that is kind of our local Kentucky map. The power that is provided by for the distribution cooperatives in Kentucky comes from one of three sources. We have two generation and transmission cooperatives, East Kentucky Power and Big Rivers Electric, who you'll hear from in a little bit. And our third power provider is the Tennessee Valley Authority, which provides power to 5 co-ops in the state. I would note that behind me, to my right, is Josh Tubbs with the Tennessee Valley Authority, who's a vitally important member of our team as well. And we're very proud of the team that we have representing electric cooperatives in Kentucky. So some important things to note about electric cooperatives. We are led by, belong to, and we're built by the people in local communities that we serve. Our board members are elected by the members that we serve in a similar fashion to the way that each and every one of you are elected. At our co-op annual meeting, they are elected by the membership that they serve. So electric cooperatives at their very core are 100% accountable to those members that we have in our local communities. In total, co-ops in Kentucky have 3,200 employees, 72 offices and service centers to serve our members. While we are not-for-profit cooperatives, we do pay state and local property taxes and payroll taxes as well, along with local franchise fees, and we do pay a healthy PSC assessment as well. As I just said, we are not-for-profit, so our motive is not to maximize profits. We provide service to our members at cost. But like any business, we must make ends meet, and we also must maintain equity levels to make sure that we can get affordable financing. Our members very simply demand safe, reliable, and affordable energy as well. On the previous slide, I mentioned the white areas of the map where co-ops are not. Served by municipal utilities, obviously owned by the municipalities that they serve in, and then investor-owned utilities. I wanted to spend just a brief minute describing the difference between the cooperatives and investor-owned utilities. As mentioned, co-ops are not-for-profit, and we work to maximize the benefits to our members. While investor-owned utilities seek to maximize profits for their investors, naturally, investors want to seek a share of those profits. I think any of us that own stock want to see those same benefits grow in stock price. Our members want to receive, again, safe, reliable, and affordable electricity. And an important note is that any profit that our cooperatives do make is either A, reinvested to make our system stronger, or B, given back to the members as a capital credit on a bill. And so we give that back to the members. When we do well, we make sure that that goes back to the members, or we reinvest in hardening our systems as well. In discussing a little bit about the areas that we serve, in terms of consumers per mile, in serving predominantly rural areas, our consumers per mile are significantly less than the investor-owned utilities and municipal utilities. So the revenue per mile goes down significantly, but yet we are responsible for providing the same level of service with significantly fewer customers per mile, members a mile, and on the revenue per mile as well. So as you can see of that just quickly, cooperatives derive about 1/4 of the revenue per mile as investor-owns and about 1/5 as much revenue as municipal utilities based off of the service that we have. Again, far less revenue per mile to cover our fixed costs, which are largely the same. Knowing the area that we serve, math shows us that our average member is 7.4% below the Kentucky average in household income and 22.1% below the national average. We recognize the challenges of serving rural Kentucky and are more than happy to take them on. We have the expertise of over 70 years of experience serving rural Kentucky and are happy to be there for our members every single day.
Okay, I think Senator Wheeler has a question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To what extent have federal energy policy, specifically, I know co-ops are still principally fossil fired, but to what extent have federal energy policies increased the cost of providing services to your all's rural communities, which I think, as you've remarked, have a much lower income than urban areas?
And Senator, I will defer that to our power providers on the impacts of that in terms of power production and the overall price.
Sure. David Sanford. I'm General Counsel for East Kentucky Power. If you'll indulge me, Senator, I think I'll be able to answer that as part of my presentation. But if that's okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
That's fine. Please introduce yourself. Are you finished?
I have just two more brief ones.
Go right ahead.
During the 2024 session, there were a lot of issues going on for Kentucky Electric Cooperatives, and mainly to say thank you for your work on those. We did ask for $3 million for an electric reliability defense fund. That money went to the Attorney General to fight back against overburdensome EPA regulations to help us keep power production abundant. Within House Bill 6, $45 million for state parks utility infrastructure. Many of our state parks are in dire need of utility upgrades, both electric and water. From the electric side, we hope to be able to utilize those funds to integrate state parks within the cooperative system as part of our systems. Currently, they are not. And we want to make sure that the electric systems within our state parks get up to code, can be operated safely. And that these funds will help us do that without burdening our ratepayers at home to do that. So there's a lot of work to be done with the electrical infrastructure at state parks, so thank you very much for that. We did seek $2 million in temporary worker funding for the upgrade, to facilitate the broadband expansion. We did receive those funds in September, but even before then, we began working with an engineering firm to hire, train, and deploy rapid response teams that can go out when this onslaught that we were told was coming of these pole attachment applications. These teams have our rapid response team has the ability to clear up to 3,600 additional poles per month above and beyond what our local cooperative teams can do. We've asked the pole attachers for an increase in the volume that we can do as our capacity is significant. What we've also asked the attachers for is 30 to 90 day plans. We know that being able to place our teams in the appropriate place at the appropriate time maximizes our efficiency and makes us be able to work smarter as well as harder to get this out. Obviously, with the goal of making sure that every Kentuckian who wants access to high-speed broadband can get it as quickly as possible. Our team is trained and ready and willing to go. I think David Sanford's going to touch on Senate Bill 349 a little bit later, but that was the formation of the EPIC Commission. I would note we do have our appointee to that. It is the CFO of Big Rivers Electric, Talina Matthews. We're delighted to have her on board as well. Within 349, we ask for statutory deadlines for PSC decisions. This helps cooperatives and anybody that is regulated by the Public Service Commission to just get a little more transparency and efficiency on when these decisions come. And then with our PSC vendor transparency, making sure that everybody that's regulated by the PSC is treated fairly, which we thought something important. And then my final slide for you today is many of you are members of the Rural Electric Cooperative Caucus. I want to thank you all for that. If I would have come to you a year ago, this caucus was just an idea. And in this first year, we have 96 members, which we're very proud of. We are the largest legislative caucus in the state. And we've done a number of things this year to help teach each and every one of you and ask questions and have your questions answered about electric cooperatives. I would highlight the article in orange is from Kentucky Living Magazine. Kentucky Living Magazine is the largest statewide publication. An article in there. Representative Williams is one of our co-chairs, which we very much thank him for his effort, as well as Senator Bledsoe, Senator Webb, and Representative Tackett Lafferty serve as our co-chairs. The article below from RE Magazine is a national magazine for rural electric cooperatives. Earlier this summer, we hosted an electric university event at Spurlock Power Station in Maysville. And I think it was an outstanding event, a great opportunity to see power production at its core. And that was picked up in RE Magazine, which goes out to nearly 100,000 individuals across the country. So just a brief thank you to that. If you are a member, thanks. And if you're not, we would love to have you join the caucus as an opportunity to learn as well. With that, I'll hand it over to David Sanford.
Good afternoon. My name is David Sanford. I'm General Counsel for East Kentucky Power Cooperative. It's my privilege to be able to be before you again. I've been in front of this committee many times and always look forward to it. So go ahead. I want to just provide you with a brief overview. This is a little bit more granular version of the slide that Chase showed you that shows where each of our 16 owner-member distribution cooperatives are located. East Kentucky is a $4 billion electric G&T, and to answer your question, Senator Wheeler, about $1 billion of that has been for environmental equipment over the last decade. So we serve power, we provide power to 16 distribution cooperatives in 89 counties and end up serving about 1.1 million Kentucky homes and businesses. Just to give you an update or really continuous of what our goals are. It's number one, to make our communities thrive, and we assist our owner members by doing that. It's very important to us. We all live here. We all work here. These are the communities we live in. And reliability is paramount. We want to make sure that the power that we're providing to substations is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The electric grid really is the most complex machine in the world, because you think about all the way from power plants all the way down to plugging in your iPhone at night. It's all connected. And so, being able to make sure that works and works seamlessly at the rate we do is something we take a lot of pride in. At the same time, we have to maintain a firm financial foundation and make sure that we're able to meet our debt obligations and pay our bills just like any other business. And one of the things that we try to do is make sure that as we go through a period of risk, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, to make sure that we have as much diversity as we can to kind of spread that risk and to make sure that we're as insulated as best we can, whether that's through fuel diversity, trying to decrease our carbon emissions in a smart way that makes economic sense, in promoting environmental stewardship. A lot of our members are in the agricultural community, and they're the best environmental stewards that we have. And so we're very proud of our partnerships and the work that we do with that community. And then finally, we want to make sure that we attract and retain a very skilled workforce, because none of this is easy. Being a lineman's not an easy job. Doing it when it's windy and rainy and dark, it's just the dangers are exponentially higher. So you can go on. The next slide talks about, it's a quote from Mark Christie, who's a former not chairman, but commissioner with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And I don't really like to read slides, but I want to read this one because it's very important to really kind of get the national perspective on this. And when he was FERC commissioner, he testified before the United States Senate about a year and a half ago. I think the United States is heading for a very catastrophic situation in terms of reliability. The core of the problem is actually very simple. we are retiring dispatchable generating resources at a pace and in an amount that is far too fast and far too great and is threatening our ability to keep the lights on. Now, that's a very sobering statement from a person who's in a position to know from a national perspective where the grid is. And so we see parts and pieces of that here in Kentucky, but we take what Commissioner Christie says very seriously. So resources in PJM, which is the energy market that we're a part of, it's part of the Eastern Interconnect, are increasingly constrained. What we've seen is that capacity prices over the last decade or so have been pretty flat. The capacity price is it's an auction that PJM runs, and what it does is it really says, here is the value of having a generation unit that is available to serve the public. And so in times when there's a lot of generation, the price would obviously be lower. In times when there's not as much generation, the prices would be higher. And so we've seen very stagnant or even declining prices historically over the last 10 years, which you would think would be a good thing. But that's really starting to change. And the problem is it's changing very quickly. And so what that's the result of is a retirement of a large number of our dispatchable generation resources that can be made available whenever they need to be. We're also seeing tremendous new demand from the technology sector. Originally, that was maybe Bitcoin operators, cryptocurrency mining operations, but increasingly it's data centers. And when you're talking about a data center, you're talking about anywhere between a 500 megawatt, maybe even a gigawatt of power. And so, the way to think about that is every data center essentially has its own power plant attached to it. I mean, it's just the amount of power is enormous. We're also seeing a lot of onshoring. The world is a little bit of a dangerous place right now. And so where's the safest place to invest and to build your business? It's still the United States. And so we're starting to see a lot of economic development where particularly companies in Europe and other parts of the world are finding that Kentucky's a very attractive place to build and invest, and we want to make the most of those opportunities. The last one's electric vehicle penetration. I'll say that one's probably not as significant as maybe what we thought it would have been a few years ago, but it's something that we still have our eye on because you're talking about an entire sector of the economy there with transportation, which is really important. The next slide is going to show you what's happened just in the last few months with capacity prices in PJM. You can see that they're really relatively flat. They were down as low as $28.92 in the last delivery year, the current delivery year we're in actually, and then all of a sudden they went up by a factor of 9. So when you're talking about $28.92 per megawatt per day, and then the next year it's $269 per megawatt per day, that is a substantial price increase. Now, I want to give some credit where credit's due. For decades, regardless of administration, the Public Service Commission in Kentucky has had a policy that we need to have Kentucky utilities be able to serve our native load with steel in the ground here. And because of that, when this auction price came out, that's actually good news for East Kentucky Power because we're long in the market. We have a little bit more generation than we have load. And so that means that we're able to monetize that difference and return that benefit back to our ratepayers, which helps them immensely. If you're in another state like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, where you've deregulated your electric system, and so the electricity doesn't necessarily come from the utility that's connected to your house, that's probably not going to be your situation when this new delivery year hits, and you're going to see prices start to go up dramatically. And there's already been talk in some of those states about trying to go back to a regulated market. So we appreciate wise decisions that have been made over the course of several decades that have put us in a good position to be able to handle this, but there's still a lot of challenges. Some of the uncertainty that's driving the industry right now, and I would say I've been involved with electric utilities for over 20 years. This is a period of the most uncertainty. It seems like I say that every time I'm in front of you, Mr. Chairman, but there's more uncertainty today than there even was a year ago. Right up there at the top is fuel security. You're seeing a big transition from coal-fired generation to natural gas. We saw with Winter Storm Elliott just a little bit of a hiccup and the natural gas delivery system can have significant ramifications. And I don't really blame the natural gas industry. You know, they were built to be able to serve residential, industrial load. When pipelines were developed and built in the 50s, it wasn't to serve power plants. And so, you know, they're playing catch up just as much as we are. There's a lot of questions about permitting, getting interconnections approved through PJM. That's a multi-year process. It used to be relatively simple, but now it takes a while. There's a lot of litigation around any type of permit that you want to go after, it seems like. And then supply chain is also an issue. This was very acute during COVID, but even going forward, it's going to continue to be an issue, because what happens is when you take an industry and you say, we're going to make the entire industry do something different at the same time, there are only so many vendors who can be able to supply that new demand. And so the law of supply and demand kicks in. There's only so many new turbines that can be manufactured in the world today. And whenever utility in the country is trying to get those, you can see, you know, how that constrains things. Interest rates, and really that's kind of a metaphor for the economy, has a huge impact on load, has a huge impact on borrowing cost and debt and those sorts of things. So that's always important to us. Protecting our infrastructure is increasingly important. It's not just physically protecting, it's also protecting it from cyber attacks. We're seeing more and more malign actors and national actors who are trying to take advantage of any vulnerabilities they can find. And then environmental regulation. And that's really the subject of the next slide, Mr. Chairman, which kind of addresses some of the question that you posed at the very beginning. I put here 9 of the rules that we're tracking. That these are actually rules that are going into effect. There's easily another 9 or 10 or 12 that we could add to that list, but these are the most important ones. And so we've tried to be very active and at the same time smart in pushing back on these regulations where we can. I can just tell you, like, for instance, the greenhouse gas rule, we've calculated what the impact of that would be to our Spurlock station, which I know some of you were able to visit back at the Electric University in June. That's our largest coal-fired generation unit. If we were forced to put coal capture or carbon capture and storage on that, we can't really put carbon underground in Maysville. The geology is just not appropriate for it. So we'd actually have to build a pipeline to carry carbon dioxide about 350 miles to Illinois. You can imagine the permitting challenge of taking that across the Ohio River, across the Wabash River, across, you know, any number of waters, forest, and those types of things. And then when you get it, you put it underground. The cost to do that would be about $10.7 billion. And now we're a $4 billion company, and that's just to be able to service one of our facilities with carbon capture technology. And at the end of the day, you've end up creating a parasitic load just to be able to run the compressors to do that you can now only generate 70% of the power that you're generating currently. So clearly the greenhouse gas rule is intended to kill coal plants, and if it's allowed to stand, the Supreme Court refused to grant a stay yesterday. It sets an outside termination date for coal, and there's really just not much that'll be able to be done about that. I could go through each of these rules. I don't want to spare the committee's time, but if they have questions about any, we'd be happy to come back to those. Move on. Despite. Sure.
Could we
go
ask
back?
A couple questions? Mm-hmm. Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David, what you said right now, just at the present time, these regulations are adding $1 billion to your customers' bottom line. I guess based upon your service area, how does that reflect in real dollars on the consumer's electric bills every month?
So that's a great question. And the $1 billion has been spent over time. Some of it's capital costs, some of it's, well, that's actually all the capital costs. I don't think that includes the operating costs. There is a provision in Kentucky law called the environmental surcharge that allows you to take the costs that are environmental in nature that have to do with state, federal mandates and make those a separate line item on the bill. And so utilities can roll that into their base rates if they want to, or they can keep it separate. Historically, cooperatives have actually, at least East Kentucky's cooperatives, have kept that separate so that customers every single month can see on their bill what the cost of environmental regulation is. It is a separately broken out line item on our distribution co-ops bills, and that's the monthly cost of it.
Do you have an idea of roughly what the monthly cost is to your consumer?
I'll have to get that information for you to be precise. I don't want to guess because it does change from month to month, and it'll vary from one co-op to
And I guess a
another.
brief follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chairman. So you said right now to comply with this rule, you would have to spend $10.7 billion for just one plant. I mean, I
And
guess
just one rule.
just one rule. Okay, so this is $10.7 billion that otherwise could be put into well, lots of different things. Because you're going to have to extract that from your customers, are you not? I mean, this is money they could use for groceries. This is money they could use to take their kids on vacation. This is money they could use for, I guess, that the state could use to build roads with and things like that, right? This is literally sucking money out of the pockets of consumers and the taxpayers of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, is it not?
Yeah, if that was the compliance method that we chose, it would be very punitive, and that would be the outcome. But because it's so punitive, you can't do that. And the result is, because you can't do it, you have to retire your coal-fired generation. That's the stark choice.
So if you retire that generation, though, you got to get something from somewhere else, right?
Yes.
And I guess one option is to buy it off the grid. That just puts stress on other resources, does it not?
Everybody in the market's operating under the same conditions we are.
And the more demand you have, the higher the price is. Is that general economics, as I recall it?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Senator Wheeler, I apologize for referring to you as Representative Wheeler. I apologize.
Okay, that was my grandfather, and he was a really great guy, so I take no offense. No.
All right. Representative Williams.
I had a quick question follow-up, I guess. You mentioned about PJM and some of the RTOs. Is it my understanding that they in themselves attach additional layers or requirements that you have to put in place to be a part of that organization? I mean, or if there are some of those things, could you walk me through? I mean, are there ESG mandates? Are there carbon capture mandates in addition to what the federal level says?
Yeah, PJM generally doesn't impose those types of requirements. At the core, their job is to make sure that the electric grid that they're responsible for runs in an optimized manner as efficiently as possible and at the lowest possible cost that's still reliable. So they are regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and we do have obligations we have to follow, but they're not really ESG oriented or things of that nature. Those mandates come from other federal agencies, and PJM is not a federal agency.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
David, I think this committee a couple of months ago heard some testimony that talked about two existing coal plants. I think Spurlock may have been one of those, but the estimates at that time, I'm thinking, related to the carbon rule, was projected to raise the cost of the electricity from those plants from 67 to 96%. Do you remember that?
I'm not familiar with that testimony, and we could put that together, but it was the numbers come from an affidavit that we submitted in support of the state's Attorney General Coleman's lawsuit against the EPA to challenge that. And I remember that there was an estimate for what the costs were. I just don't remember it off the top of my head, but it is substantial. I know that.
It is substantial, yes.
It's cost prohibitive.
Yes, it's cost prohibitive. Mm-hmm. Proceed. Thank you.
So despite all this uncertainty, it would be easy to just say we're not going to do anything. We're just going to wait until the dust settles. But that in itself is a decision to do nothing, and so that's not our style. And so our board has been really working over the last couple of years to take all of these various threads, all these various uncertainties, try to mesh them together, think about them. What's the optimal solution? How do we move forward? And frankly, how do we be bold at a time? Because even, in times of great crisis, there's great opportunities, according to Winston Churchill. So we've already announced a couple of projects. We have a couple of solar projects that are before the Public Service Commission now, 146 megawatts total between those two in Fayette and Marion counties. We're also very excited about a brand new power plant that will be located in Casey County, just outside of Liberty. It's a $500 million investment in that community, and it's going to be 216 megawatts of reciprocating engines. Now, you're like, reciprocating engines, haven't they been around for the last 120 years? And the answer is yes, they have been. It's a very proven, very reliable technology, and it gives you the ability to be very nimble in responding to pricing signals from the grid, which again will help us be able to keep our costs as low as possible, be able to respond to consumer demand. We've got a couple of applications that will be coming up in the near future. We're going to be looking to build a 745 megawatt combined cycle unit at our Cooper station, which is in Burnside, just out Somerset. That's a very substantial, it's $1 billion plus investment, and it's very important to have generation in that part of the state to support the grid. So we're very excited about that. And then, what we want to do is we want to keep coal in our inventory just as long as we can. And so under the greenhouse gas rule, you have to assume it's going to stay until some court says that it's not. The way to do that is to co-fire it with natural gas. And so we're looking to make investments to be able to co-fire our Cooper 2 in Spurlock units with natural gas and coal. All the inventory, all the processes, procedures, machinery to do coal will stay in place. And that gives us an extra 6 or 7 years at least to be able to keep our coal. And the reason that's important is because, there's a big transition towards natural gas, but at the end of the day, it's very nice to have 30, 40, 50, maybe 60 days of fuel on the ground. And that's what coal supplies you. And really, outside of nuclear, nothing else does. So keeping those existing coal units, burning coal for as long as we can is an important part of our strategy. And then we're also getting fairly close to announcing some additional projects that will be made possible through the New Era program that was passed as part of the Inflation Reduction Act a year or so ago. So a little bit more on that to come. We're working with the RUS on that. So the bottom line, we're going to be making several $1 billion of investment in our communities over the next few years. There's always a concern, what's the impact to rates going to be? The good news is we think our projections are that it's going to be in line with just normal inflation. And you may ask, well, how can you spend billions of dollars and not have huge increases in rates? And the good news is we're making these new investments. Some of our older investments are starting to have been fully retired. The costs have been recovered. And so the cost of those are going down at the same time we're making the new investments. And so when you net that out, there will be some cost increases, but they should be relatively modest relative to inflation. So we're trying to be very bold and proactive. I want to wrap up sort of like Chase did with a thank you. The General Assembly has done a lot to protect reliability, and we're extremely grateful for that. I would go back to the 23 regular session with Senate Bill 4 and then Senate Bill 349. The appropriation that went to the Attorney General's office to support reliability has already demonstrated to be well worth it. And I want to give a special appreciation to Attorney General Coleman. His office has been very aggressive in looking out for the interest of consumers and fighting back on some of these federal rules. And, just the amount of legal work that him and the Solicitor General and others have been putting forth on this is very commendable. So we appreciate their efforts.
Okay, thank you. Before, we have a question from the sponsor of Senate Bill 4 and Senate Bill 349, Senator Mills.
I had a late question on the regulation portion. Can you refresh my memory on the greenhouse gas rule? What are the dates? You were talking about dates. Can you refresh our memory on the dates if you're not compliant, when you'd have to shut down, or what are the dates associated with that?
So the most immediate date is actually coming up relatively quickly. It's 2026, and that's when the state has to submit its implementation plan. In other words, it's when the state has to say, here's how we intend to comply with this rule. Now, that seems like it's a fair ways off, but it's not. It's about less than 2 years, and so that doesn't give the state a lot of time, the cabinet, to really work with utilities to figure out what's the best solution, how do we meet these mandates. When you're talking about, if you're not going to do anything, you can run coal. I believe it's through the end of 2031. And then you get a little bit more. You get about another 8 or 9 years, 7 or 8 years if you co-fire it. But I believe 2039 is sort of the outside date.
Just follow up real quick. So would you see the EPIC Commission possibly helping with that implementation plan?
I think that will be probably up to the EPIC Commission to determine, but the nice thing about that commission is it's a very well-rounded, balanced perspective on the energy industry.
Yep.
That really will look at it from every possible perspective. And so we fully expect, and one of the reasons we were supportive of that legislation is we think that they'll have a lot to contribute to this in the years ahead.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
Representative White.
Yes, sir. Coming up with sort of a scenario, if it happens, let's say if we have a new administration on the federal level in January, can some of these deadlines and rules be postponed or put off? Do you see that as a possibility?
Yeah, hypothetically, yeah, that's definitely possible. What we've really observed over the last 12 years, 10 years is, federal policy or policy at the federal level just sort of whipsaws back and forth. And so one administration will come in and do one thing, the next administration will come in and undo it, and then the next administration undoes that. And so, there's no administration that can do anything on a permanent basis, which makes it hard. Your policy cycle is 4-8 years, really. That's the longest that we've seen. But we're having to make 40-year investment decisions. So I think, I want to commend our board in trying to take the long view is regardless of what administration's in power in Washington, what is the best solution to be able that we can deliver safest, cheapest, most reliable power to our customers. So,
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Now,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and
please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Tyson Kamoff. I'm General Counsel for Big Rivers Electric Corporation, and I just wanted to say that I appreciate the opportunity to come here and give you a little overview of Big Rivers and some of the issues that we're facing, which are the same issues that David just talked about. I mean, they're industry-wide issues. So we, like East Kentucky, we're a nonprofit generation and transmission rural electric cooperative. We're owned by the distribution co-op members that we serve. We have 3 members. That's Jackson Purchase over in Paducah, Kennergy, that's headquartered in Henderson, and Meade County RECC in Brandenburg. And together they serve about 120,000 homes and businesses in 22 western Kentucky counties, all the way from Brandenburg to Ballard County. We have 5 locations. We have 2 generating stations. One of those is in Centertown in Ohio County, and the other one's right on the Henderson County, Webster County line near Seabury. We have our transmission function, so that's transmission engineering, planning and compliance, plus energy control, and our transmission and substation crews. Those folks are split between 2 locations in Henderson. And then we also have our headquarters, which is now in Owensboro. And our mission is to safely deliver competitive and reliable wholesale power and cost-effective shared services to our members. As we're looking at how to fulfill that mission, of course, we take an all of the above approach to how we plan our generating assets to meet our members' needs. We look to have, like David said, it's important to have steel in the ground. So we want to have enough generation, either owned or through long-term power purchases, that will reliably meet our members' needs. Currently, we have our Seabury location has 3 power plants. All of those are down natural gas fired. We have a 65 megawatt combustion turbine and 2 units that were recently converted from coal, and they combine to provide 454 megawatts of power. And that conversion was really necessary just to be able to keep those valuable units online and able to provide reliable service. And we also have contractual entitlement to 178 megawatts of hydropower from the Southeastern Power Administration. And we have a long-term 20-year power purchase agreement with a solar developer for 160 megawatts. And that project's currently under construction in near Seabury, Kentucky, expected to come online in the first quarter of next year. But the real workhorse of our fleet is it remains our coal-fired, our 417 megawatt coal-fired Wilson generating station in Ohio County. And our Wilson plant, it provided 95% of our generation last year. I think which just shows you how important coal and other baseload generation is to continued reliability and affordability. So our all-over-the-above approach to generation allows us to provide reliable service while still mitigating risks. For example, the efforts that we've taken over the last decade to diversify our generation portfolio has allowed us to reduce CO2 emissions by over 70% since 2010. And that amount exceeds the requirements of the Clean Power Plan. But there's still challenges. So the greenhouse gas rule is, of course, one of the biggest challenges that we face right now. And thinking of that and planning for that and how we meet that is an important consideration. Another big aspect of reliability is the transmission system. So we have over 1,300 miles of transmission lines. Our SAIDI score, which is really just a measure of transmission reliability, was 1.404 in 2023, which means basically that if you look at the end-use customers, on average, they experienced 1.4 minutes of outages due to the transmission system. So that's a 99.99% reliability on the transmission system, which puts us well in the top quartile performance for utilities. Fulfilling our mission for competitive and reliable power helps us be a good partner in economic development. And over the last couple of years, this has helped, us bring some good economic development successes to our area. So Nucor, which is a $1.7 billion steel mill, is located in Meade County in Brandenburg, and Meade County RECC's service territory, and they bring 400 full-time jobs at an average salary of about $75,000. Block Mining is a cryptocurrency mining facility, so they invested $50 million over in Paducah, and that brings 20 jobs. And then Pratt Paper has located a corrugated box recycling and paper mill complex in South Henderson County in Kenergy's service territory, and that's expected to bring about 321 jobs at about $30 an hour. Other recent developments at Big Rivers, so we've gone through a lot of transition over the last few years, and we're in an exciting position. We had our CEO retired at the beginning of the year. We brought on a new CEO. He comes from having been president and CEO of Southern Illinois Power Cooperative for the last 10 years. So he has a lot of experience in the utility industry and a lot of experience with co-ops. With Don coming on, our board decided to engage in some new strategic planning. So we revised our strategic plan based on a foundational principle of safety, and the board adopted 7 strategic priorities. It's operational excellence, financial strength, a risk managed portfolio, rate management, enterprise risk management, people and culture, and member services and economic development. And we intend to rely on these new priorities as we look to what we need to deal with the challenges and opportunities going forward. And David went through many of those and the impact of those. But really, we're looking to how do we best provide reliable and affordable electric service, in in light of the challenges that we face. And it's not like challenges are new. We've had challenges in the past. We lost 850 megawatts, which is about 60% of our load in 2014 when 2 aluminum smelters left our system. And instead of forcing them to shut down, we came up with a way to keep them in business, at least for a period, while mitigating the rate impact on other folks. And we had to shut down power plants, and but we came through that, and we're now looking towards the future, and now there's new challenges to face. So the environmental regulations with the greenhouse gas rule and the CCR rule, and how to deal with those, and also. So East Kentucky's a member of PJM, and we're in a different RTO. It's MISO, the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, and they have the same challenges that PJM has. There's a lot of, constraints going forward. A lot of folks in MISO are retiring coal units and building gas units and building renewable source generating sources, and that. That impacts us. So, we seek to have as much generation as we need to serve our members, but, we are a member of an RTO that dispatches our generation, and so the constraints on their system will impact us. And, I think just want to kind of reiterate what David said, that we're thankful for the General Assembly and the Attorney General and some of the efforts that you all have made to support reliability. The Senate Bill 4 from 2023 and Senate Bill 349 from 24, and the Electric Reliability Defense Fund, and then the Attorney General's efforts to combat some of these regulations that are threatening reliability. So as we look to the future, we'll keep looking at a diverse portfolio for generation to mitigate risk, to be able to provide reliable generation. We're going to rely on our strategic priorities to take a fresh look going forward on how to meet our members' needs. And we look forward to keep working with you on how to keep delivering reliable and affordable generation. So thank you, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. We have three final questions. First from Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm hoping you didn't answer the question I'm about to ask, and I missed it somehow. But and I think this is a question for both of the power generators. It's good to see you, by the way, Tyson.
Thank you.
What percentage of your capacity are you currently at with your loads with your clients?
So we sell both, power to our native system, our end-use customers, and then we have a little excess that we use to kind of maximize our generators to help offset rates to our members. So we sell power to Owensboro municipal utilities, and they're not a member, but that sale does help us, mitigate risks and cost to our other members. So if you're looking at how much of our generation is devoted to our native load, we have about 1,200 megawatts of generation and about 800 megawatts of native load. So,
yeah, and I'd answer the question a little bit differently, because one of the things that makes us unique is that we're in PJM's interconnection. PJM's peak load occurs during the summertime, but East Kentucky's peak load occurs during the winter. And so because of that, we're a little bit short on power typically in the wintertime, but we have, the full backing of PJM to be able to fill that. But during the summertime, we have a fair amount of excess generation that we're able to sell into the market and be able to harvest, that revenue for the benefit of our members. So the last 2 winters, we've set actually new peaks, Winter Storm Elliott, and then I think it was January when we had some pretty significant weather, and we've set new peaks both of the last 2 years, which tells us there's a lot of growth in load on our system, and our new load forecast reflects that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully.
Yeah, I think it does. I think what I'm getting to is with the new regulations, the new rules that you're having to deal with, and this is a reiteration, I think, but at what point do we become a risk of maxing out the load, maxing out your capacity due to shutdowns and that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, we're looking at a pretty ambitious investment cycle that we're going into with, close to 2,000 megawatts of new capacity. So, that's significant, and that's just for our anticipated existing load and load growth. That doesn't count if, we were to get a 500 megawatt data center or something like that. That's not built into the assumptions because it's really speculative. So, from our perspective, this is a period where we need to be adding generation, and federal policy makes it more difficult to figure out what that new generation should be. But we think we've got a solid plan.
And we're similar. We're looking at the future and when and what kind of generation do we build, for when as David said, we're making 40-year decisions. And so, we're looking at building generation to come online maybe in 2032, and how do you do that in light of what's the environmental regulatory space going to look like then, and what can you do? But this is a continuous process of as far as planning to meet our member load, and like if you take the greenhouse gas rule, like if that stays in effect, that's going to have a major impact because that will require us to comply at our Wilson station, which is 417 megawatts. And so we're either going to have to figure out a way to coal fire it, which is there's no pipeline near there that's sufficient to handle that. So it's awfully expensive to do that there, or do carbon capture and storage, which like even if you had the ability to store it on site, you're going to spend over $1 billion, which is just not feasible. So you're probably going to have to retire that unit and come up with another way to provide 417 megawatts. So we're going to keep working on this and planning for it and addressing the challenges as they come.
Thank you. I do have one more question, but if you'd like to come back to me,
let me come back to you.
Okay.
I've kind of lost my train of thought, so I'm going to go to you now.
I want to go back to the deadline that's coming up, that's looming as far as presenting a plan. I almost think I heard you say that even if there becomes some more common sense regulations next year, you may get to a point of no return where you put a plan into place and have to do it whether it's necessary anymore or not due to regulation. Did I hear that, or did I infer that?
Maybe a little bit of both. Okay. That's always a risk, and and we have seen that. That's one of the reasons that we always like to see challenges to environmental regulations, or really any sort of regulation, be worked through the courts as quickly as possible, because when you're taking 2 or 3 years for the courts to figure out whether a rule is valid or not, everything moves forward regardless. And I had the good fortune to be actually at the Supreme Court when one of the rules was argued back in February. It was the Good Neighbor FIP, and one of the justices said, I don't know what the sense of urgency here is. Nobody has to comply with this before 2027. And we're like, yeah, but that we don't have that's no time at all. And so part of the job that we have is being able to explain to the courts just how urgent things are, and 3 years may seem like a long time, but when you're talking about very long lead items, it goes by in a flash.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been struggling with quite a bit is that we all know that we did have with Winter Storm Elliott a few years ago situations where people's power was interrupted. And yes, it was kind of a systematic thing to keep from losing the entire grid. But that's something that we weren't used to experiencing in Kentucky. And, I mean, we were talking about some data center that's wanting to come here, but now you're not going to be able to guarantee a data center a constant flow of power with solar and wind power. You're just not going to do it. And so, I mean, I think that's something that we're going to have to realize. I do know that, as administrations change, we all realize that the court systems are going to be important. And we really are fortunate to have a good attorney general who is going to use his position to involve the court systems. But, we have seen in the past, especially with the Obama administration, where groups would sue the EPA for not, regulate the certain issue or whatever, I honestly believe that those groups were in cahoot with the EPA, who would then enter into an agreement where they would regulate that, and it would be part of a consent decree signed on by a judge that you're not going to be able to mitigate in the court systems in the future. And what we have to have is people where they can use the court systems, but they're not having to fight consent decrees that are very, very hard to overturn. So, David, one question I have for you is, you mentioned that your peak load is really in the wintertime. I think during Winter Storm Elliott, I believe, you had to go on the grid and purchase some very expensive power. Did the Public Service Commission limit your ability to be able to pass that on to consumers?
We were thankfully we did not have any blackouts, and we were able to serve power to serve our load. The way that storm played out was very interesting because what they also had in effect through PJM were penalties for if you were supposed to generate and couldn't, but then also rewards if you weren't necessarily supposed to generate but you could. And so just because the way that the gas systems worked and some of the problems there, we weren't always able to have the power plants that we wanted to have on to be on at that time. But thankfully on net, we were able to have more power online than we were called to have. And so that ended up being a positive for us. And so when it came to the rate making, everything worked out. So
good.
Yeah.
Okay. Representative Miles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Tyson, it's always nice to have people from home presenting, so we're always happy about that. I'm going to probably go down a different path as far as kind of past and present leadership of Big Rivers. I know we were at a point where I felt like Big Rivers was pushing back on more of the regulations as far as that goes, and really trying to push hard to help coal survive. That was what we would consider in our area a reliable source. I think that the gentleman from Perry and all the gentlemen from East Kentucky, and I think our Senator Webb left us for a little bit, but just kind of the mindset of it doesn't appear that the current leadership is going, I don't want to say they've given up, but I'm concerned that we're not fighting back as hard as we should be fighting back to protect our reliable source. And so I just want to make that statement. I know that there's others that may want to weigh in on that, but just to kind of, we understand what the regulations are, we understand what the rules are, we understand that you all are caught between a rock and a hard place. We understand that. But we also, if we don't push back, I feel like, kind of like what you said on suing and things like that, if we don't push back, I do feel like we're going to go down a path that's unsustainable and unreliable. So if you want to comment on that, you're welcome to. If not, you can take that back.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Representative Miles, and I appreciate your comments, and we would love to have you down again to come and talk about those issues if you want to. I am, and I don't want to speak for our CEO, but I've heard him say many times, we're committed to coal, and we're going to keep Wilson around as long as we can, and we were supportive, both through, ourselves and through KEC of the bills that you all have passed and the Attorney General's efforts, and we've given the Attorney General some support as far as statements in their litigation. So we are committed to fighting back against some of these regulations, and if there's more that we can do or that you're looking for us to provide, then please let us know.
Thank you, Tyson.
And final question from Senator Mills.
Yeah, I know. I got about 3 questions, but I'll try to. Everybody's been hitting on the main question I wanted to talk about. Is it's just so obvious that the current administration is out to kill coal and even gas with the regulations. And I get emails weekly of people from around Kentucky that are what I would consider extreme environmentalists that believe that we can power our nation and our state with wind and solar. It's totally unrealistic. And can y'all just comment from an operator standpoint about how unrealistic and how dangerous that is for human thriving?
Yeah, I can give you a good analogy, and this is not mine. I'm borrowing it from somebody who shared it the other day. But we support everything. We're an all above company, but when you're talking about small scale versus utility scale, it's kind of like asking a farmer, would you like to farm 400 1-acre lots or one 400-acre lot? And obviously the economies of scale make that a very obvious question, very obvious answer. And that's what we're talking about when, again, we're talking about the world's most complex machine, the North American Interconnect. From generator to iPhone, it has to work.
And then I just finish up by saying I agree with what Representative Miles said. I think it's important for us to continue to have the kind of the gaming out policy plan of, always thinking ahead. And I didn't hear anybody talk about nuclear today. I would hope that in your planning out and gaming out of future power needs that you are thinking about nuclear, because specifically in my area we have a ton of transmission, and at some point that transmission might be open for another power source. So I would like to, and then the other issue is just if you would, and it's kind of what Representative Miles said, is that if y'all will remain open to, if there are changes in administration, to be in position to aggressively protect coal if that was possible. For instance, if the Trump administration said we're going to build 12 new coal-fired plants with, all kinds of waivers of liability and everything else, would we be able and would we be ready to build one of those in Western Kentucky or Eastern Kentucky?
Yeah, let me address the nuclear piece first. We're very strong proponents of nuclear, but we are not big enough company to take on that risk by ourselves. So the last significant nuclear units that came on about 8 years, I think 8 years behind budget and about $20 billion over budget. So, but I'll look back to my TVA friend. They've got some very exciting things going on in the nuclear space, and we are rooting for them. And East Kentucky's in the TVA fence, so if they can bring some of those projects online, the SMRs particularly, that's definitely on our long-term horizon. But it's just too risky and costly right now to be a short-term thing.
And Senator, I agree with David. My CEO of the Kentucky Association of Electric Cooperatives, Chris Perry, has been appointed to the Nuclear Commission. Is delighted to serve on that. So I think we include nuclear in an all-of-the-above approach. But it's obviously a wildly complicated topic, but we certainly want to be prepared should the opportunity arise.
Let me ask one question. We talk about coal generation. About 10 years ago, I think there were actually some discussions about nuclear and coal, and that doesn't seem to have gone anywhere since then. But I think that that time, the discussion was that because of the high heat that can be generated with nuclear, that you could eliminate some of the carbon because of that. Are there any thoughts along those lines now?
I'm not personally aware of any discussions along those lines, but that's not to say that they haven't happened somewhere else.
Okay. Let me just say I've really enjoyed your presentation today, and I think that the landscape is changing. It's changing a lot, and I've been wrong because I actually have said in recent past that I didn't think there would be any more large-scale nuclear reactors built, simply because what you talked about, the time frame going 5 times what it was intended to, and $20 billion cost overruns. But I'm hearing from some of the people who have the nuclear that despite those overruns and the time frame getting it done, they're kind of glad they have them now. And even I think Bill Gates now mentioned of opening 3 Mile Island, and so I really thought that the future of nuclear was going to be the small modular nuclear reactors, but there does seem to be some discussion out there now of large nuclear facilities in our future. I don't know if that's possible or not, but it does seem to be something that's being talked about. So, anyone want to comment on that?
Yeah, it's interesting, particularly when you talk about data centers, because a nuclear power plant may equal one very large data center, and so I know Mr. Gates has been a lot involved in trying to develop some of the SMRs. The 3 Mile Island, seems to maybe be sort of an interim solution until they can really get that technology online. I think, just from a general risk perspective, the newer SMRs are probably going to be less costly, more safe, and definitely more flexible. So if I was a betting person, I would say that's probably where the nuclear industry should head. But they haven't asked my opinion.
Well, and I think part of the problem too is that the regulators don't seem to if they really want to speed this up, the thing to do is not require the same type of permitting process that you would require with that large scale facility, right. And that doesn't seem to be the case. They have not in any way streamlined that process or speeded that process up, even for small modular reactors. So, gentlemen, we thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank the committee for